Hey there, have you ever wondered about the ancient herders of southern Africa? Well, today we're going to dive into the world of the fascinating Khoikhoi people with a fun little history quiz. I'll ask the questions, you see if you know the answers, and hey, we'll learn something new together.
So, are you ready to test your knowledge? Awesome. Let's jump right in. First up, let's talk about what was at the absolute heart of Khoikhoi society, their animals, and what those animals really meant to them.
Okay, question one. Let's start with the basics. Who were the Khoikhoi? Well, they were these incredibly skilled herders, also known as pastoralists, who made their way into southern Africa, bringing this really unique nomadic way of life with them. That leads us perfectly into question number two. What kind of animals did the Khoikhoi actually own? They raised three main types of domesticated animals. You had sheep, you had goats, and most importantly, you had cattle. And let me tell you, these weren't just farm animals, they were the absolute foundation of their entire world. So question three, who owned the cattle and what did they really mean in Khoikhoi society? Get this. It was the men who owned the herds, and owning cattle was a direct sign of a man's status and his influence in the community. The bigger your herd, the more powerful you are. Simple as that. All right, here's a thinker for you. Question four. If cattle were so incredibly important, why was beef only eaten on special occasions? The answer is simple but really powerful. Their livestock was their wealth. Slaughtering a cow was kind of like taking a huge chunk of cash out of your savings account today. You just didn't do it, unless it was for a really, really good reason. Okay, question five. So besides meat, can you name some other ways the Khoikhoi used their livestock? Oh, they were super resourceful. They drank the milk, of course. They used their animals like money to trade for other things they needed. And they even used their cattle as pack animals to haul their belongings when they moved. Pretty smart, right? You're doing great so far. Now, let's switch gears a little and zoom in on the daily life of the Khoikhoi. We're talking their homes, their communities, and how they were structured. Let's kick this section off with question six. How big were these Khoikhoi groups? Typically, they lived in communities of about 50 to 200 people. And to put that in perspective, that was actually quite a bit larger than the hunter-gatherer groups of their sand neighbors. And question seven, what were their homes like? Their shelters were just ingenious and totally perfect for a life on the move. They built these collapsible huts using frames made of poles and then covered them with woven grass mats, so they were super easy to take apart and rebuild wherever they set up camp next. This brings us to question eight. And this is really clever. How were these huts arranged? The layout tells you everything about their priorities. They would place their huts in a big circle. Then, at night, they'd bring all their precious livestock into the middle, basically using their homes as a living, protective wall to keep them safe from predators. Now for our last question in this section, number 9. Who was in charge of a Khoikhoi group? Well, it wasn't just a one-person show. The community was led by a chief, but he would always talk things over with the other senior men to make the big decisions for the whole group. All right, time for our final section. We've learned about the Khoikhoi and how they lived, so now let's explore their really complex relationship with another group living in the same area, the San people. Question 10. Can you name one reason why the Khoikhoi and the San sometimes had conflicts? The biggest issue, really, was competition over resources. The Khoikhoi needed wide open land for their livestock to graze. At the same time, the San needed that exact same land for hunting. And on top of that, both groups desperately needed access to the same water sources, which, as you can imagine, often created some tension. And that brings us to question 11. How did the Khoikhoi see themselves compared to the San? Well, because they owned property, their livestock, the Khoikhoi generally saw themselves as being superior to the San, who were hunter-gatherers. This idea of status was a really big part of their identity. But it wasn't all conflict. So question 12, can you think of an example of how they might have interacted peacefully? Yeah, despite their differences, the two groups also found ways to cooperate. Some San men, who were expert trackers, would actually work for the Khoikhoi as hunters. And pretty importantly, they sometimes married each other, blending their families and their cultures. And for our very last question of the quiz, number 13, what does the term Khoisan actually mean? Khoisan is the collective name that historians and anthropologists use for both the Khoikhoi and the San peoples, and it's a way to recognize their shared roots and cultural heritage in southern Africa.
And that's our quiz. You did a fantastic job.
If there's one big thing to take away from all this, it's how owning livestock shaped every single part of Khoikhoi life, from their wealth and power to their homes and even their relationships. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does the stuff we own, our homes, our cars, our technology, how does that shape the way we live and see the world today? Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.